The AI misinformation continues to fly, and in the latest round, Anthropic just dropped a report on the labor market impacts of AI. And in it, you probably have seen it. There's this spider chart trending everywhere online right now. Everybody's sharing it, and pretty much everyone sharing it is sharing it for a multitude of the wrong reasons and leaving out some really key information from that chart that completely changes what it means. I'm Christopher Lind, and this is Future Focused. And this week, I'm going to spend some time unpacking the report, specifically bunker busting this whole spider chart nonsense, and then talking about some other key insights that you can take from the report, because there's some good information in there I think you should know about. But then I also want to translate that over to help you understand, so what do I do with this and how do I move forward with it? But before we dive in, it would mean the world to me if you share this episode, and subscribe if you're not, so you don't miss the reality checks as I continue navigating this space. And if you get meaningful value out of this episode, I'd love it if you went to buymeacoffee.com/Christopher Lind and supported the work. And more formally, if your organization or you are struggling with these kind of crazy changes, please feel free to set up a time to chat. We can talk and possibly work together to build a roadmap to help you get through it. Okay, so before we get into it, just a lay of the land of the show. So I am going to specifically focus on 4 or technically 5 of the big charts in the report and just talk about what they're actually talking about and what they mean, because they're showing up all over social media feeds, often with little context. And so I want to take some time unpacking those. And then I have 3 actions that I think are applicable to every business professional and leader in an organization to say, here's what I took from this, here's what I can do in response to it. So the first one I want to hit on is this chart right here. Okay. This is the one that is showing up all over the place. It is showing the theoretical capability of what AI can do. So it can theoretically do these things versus what's actually observed. And I mean, the first obvious insight from this is the fact that, hey, wow, AI can theoretically do a lot more than what we've seen it actually do. And actually, I think there's some real merit and value to that point. Yes, I completely 100% agree. We are not using AI to its full capability. So if that's what you walk away from with this, and that's it, that's where it stops, I would say that is a reasonable conclusion one can come to from this. What it is not, that is probably one of the biggest misses in this whole thing, is that this chart is representing tasks, not jobs. And everywhere I look, most of the posts and things talking about this chart are talking about this chart as though these are the theoretical jobs it will eliminate versus the jobs it has already eliminated. And you're going to see from some of the other things that I talk about that is not even an accurate representation of this post. So yes, there is a gap between what AI could do and what it's currently doing. Absolutely. I think that is a valid conclusion from that. But keep in mind, these are tasks, okay? And jobs are not just a bunch of random tasks cobbled together. And that is what so many people are missing when it comes to the use of AI in what they're doing as they're making decisions about how it can be used in a work environment. Just because AI can perform a task, maybe even a whole bunch of tasks that may make up a job, does not mean AI can replace a person doing that job. It might dramatically change the way the job is done, but you can't just do a one-for-one replacement. It doesn't work that way. And it is a huge miss, and it's a huge misrepresentation of that spider chart. I think the other thing that is very much missed in this is that there are very few guidelines in what they mean by observable. And even the report limitations mention this. It says, well, we didn't really, there were like kind of vague judgment calls on how we determine significant use. And their judgment of what was observable was we observe significant use. It is in no way, shape, or form representing effectiveness of that task. So going back to this, looking at it, you might say, okay, they observed it doing all those red things. But if you were to actually dig into this and say, did it observe them doing them effectively? Or did it just see them doing them? Like if an expert actually audited the work it did, would it be work that is qualified as good? We don't know. And that is completely missing from all the conversations around that chart. Is you actually have to shrink that red even smaller based on other data I've covered before that shows just because AI can do something doesn't mean it does it very well. So you need to be really careful when you see this chart and how you take it into your decision making, because you may look at that and start projecting the impact of AI on jobs based on a spider chart that actually isn't even looking at jobs. It's just looking at tasks that have been bundled into certain job type categories that are now being used and interpreted in all sorts of different ways. So I think it's really important that you think about that for leaders who are considering the future of what might you think about? Yeah. Is there a lot more opportunity? Absolutely. You should be considering and evaluating AI for a lot more than you probably are right now. That's a lot of the work that I'm doing right now, is trying to help people understand what should we be thinking about? Where are the missed opportunities? We haven't even considered experimenting with AI because the gap is huge. And that chart does represent a pretty accurate divide between how it's being used and what it could potentially be used for. But do not interpret that as, well, that means it can take up that many jobs. It can't. And even Anthropic, even in a lot of the arrogance they have about what AI can do, is not even close to that. And even they acknowledge that. So be careful with that spider chart. It is not what it is being represented as largely out there. So let's shift to another chart that's in there that has to do with job elimination. Okay. Everybody's talking, and this pairs off the previous chart, which the previous chart is talking about, okay, it can theoretically do these tasks. Here's what we've observed it doing, in no way tied to effectiveness. But then let's talk about, well, what is it doing to jobs? Now, the way they looked at jobs is top quartile is like exposed jobs, which I'll talk about later, right after this, when we talk about what that means. But then we have to say, well, no exposure. So it has no exposure to AI implementation. And so, it can't be exposed or in any way, things like that. And so when we look at the actual chart of unemployment, how is it actually affecting unemployment? It's actually pretty insignificant. Now, I always get blown up in the comments in this because people always make comments about, well, what about all the layoffs? What about all this other stuff? I'm not saying those things aren't happening. What I'm saying is the data isn't showing that those are tied directly to AI. And so the idea that the AI apocalypse is coming and that everybody's job is being taken by AI, it just doesn't match the data. And it actually doesn't match what senior leaders are making decisions about. Many times AI is a cover for something else. And so even when people are hearing and reading this report, they're interpreting exposure as elimination. And exposure is not the same thing as elimination. While the chart may be growing, while people may be saying, well, there's greater exposure, there's more opportunity for exposure, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate over to unemployment. Now, there are lots of things we could say about whether it actually has to be able to do the job for leaders to make decisions about job elimination. There is so much we could talk about here, but I think it's important that the data coming from Anthropic actually is matching other data sources on unemployment that would indicate there isn't this mass job elimination happening as a direct result of AI. Is it happening being influenced by AI? Yes, but there are a lot of other factors directly to it. Now, I would never go so far as to say AI is not having an impact on the job market. That's not it. It's just when this report gets represented as AI is, wiping out jobs, the report itself contradicts that. So it's just important to understand what the data is. Now, like I said, we can talk about what are the other factors. We can talk about, well, what is actually happening? How do we prepare for that? Which we'll get into some of that. But we just need to be really clear that, unemployment is not necessarily directly being just torpedoed by artificial intelligence in the sense that AI is just taking jobs in swaths, even though that is what the hype and the media and everything around it is trying to convince us of. Okay. So then the other question that comes into place is like, who then is actually being affected by AI if you were to interpret it from this report? And I think this is where there are some really interesting paradoxes that you have to take into consideration when you look at AI and how to think about it. Now, some of them have to do with the demographics of who is being impacted here. I think a lot of early predictions were AI was going to come for a lot of blue collar work. Then it shifted to white collar work. Now we're starting to see a mix of all over the place. I'm not going to sit and go line by line. You can check out the report itself, but you're seeing that it is affecting highly educated people. It's also affecting hourly workers. It's tending to, not hit people with lower degrees of education, and it's tending to hit people on a heavier distribution with high degrees of education. So I think what we're seeing is it's just not quite playing out the way that we thought. Now, the other thing from some of the demographic data in the report that I thought was really interesting was some of the contradictions between job growth and exposure. Now, remember, exposure doesn't mean elimination. Exposure just means how much are they anticipating that the tasks, not the job, the tasks within the job could partially be performed by AI. The higher the exposure, the larger the percentage of the work that could hypothetically, the tasks that could be done by AI. So as you can imagine, there are perceptions that customer service. Now, I don't agree with all of their conclusions. For example, I don't think AI can actually do nearly 70% of a customer service rep's job. I think that's a gross underestimate of what customer service people do. But that said, we could have that debate. But if you look at it, you might say, okay, well, that makes sense. Higher exposure, customer service rates like down. The projection for employment is down because AI is going to be taking away some of that. But then you look at other jobs and you go, well, software developers, we're hearing all over the place that AI is coming for coding. You don't even need to learn coding anymore because AI is going to be doing it all, even though the data says completely otherwise. And what you're seeing in some of this is the BLS is making projections based on what it's seen before. So software developer jobs have grown, exponentially, things like that. And so it's going to say, well, yeah, of course they're going to grow more without necessarily taking all this into account. At the same time, I actually think this does indicate some of the nuance that is accurate in what I'm seeing inside organizations, which is the fact that you're not necessarily seeing, just because a job has a high degree of exposure or AI can support or augment a lot of the work it does, doesn't necessarily mean they're eliminating mass swaths of that. Or where they are, they're learning their lesson and coming back from that. So as an example, you look at software developers, lots of companies did assume that because of AI's capability, they wouldn't need software developers anymore. And many of them wiped large percentages of them out. And if you actually follow up with a lot of that, they are then hiring them back because they actually need these people. And so it's a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of what happens, but it just goes back to what I've been saying the whole time, which is just because AI can perform tasks does not mean that, it doesn't mean that you can replace the jobs is really what I mean by that. Now, the third insight that I would, just briefly touch on, I touched on it a little bit here, actually has to do with this one, which is that, again, going and looking at the education degree area where bachelor's and graduate degrees have a really high, percentage of people that are in greater exposure levels. this actually ties, and it's not necessarily laid out in here completely, but in the report, it talks a little bit about where we are seeing high degrees of exposure. This is a miss that's going to come up next, which is a lot of the exposure is in your older, more educated, more seasoned, more highly paid roles. So a lot of the busy work that those roles are doing is actually where a lot of that high degree of exposure is coming from. So it's not the entry level. It's not that kind of administrative stuff. Yes, it can do a lot of those, but it's actually also a lot of your more seasoned professionals, which again, you may not be feeling the pressure, but the pressure is actually being felt by a lot of your not top as in better, but higher paid, higher educated. You have less of them on hand. That's actually where a lot of the pressure is. And so I see that in a lot of the conversations I have with people who are on the job market, who might be looking for things where they're seasoned professionals. They've been doing their work for a long time in the corporate sphere, and they're having a hard time finding it because of some of the misunderstandings about reports like these, where people go, well, see, exposure is high in these highly paid, highly seasoned roles, therefore we don't need them anymore. And that's just not the case. That's not the case. That's not true. And companies are learning this the hard way. Now, the other and final insight that I have on this one has to do with entry-level work. When I talk to people on the regular, you'll talk to folks in higher ed and new graduates, things like this. Many of them are finding, hey, it's hard to find jobs. It's hard to find work. Entry-level work seems to be being eaten up by AI, which I get that feedback in the comments all the time from folks. Well, what about, entry-level folks? They can't find jobs because AI is doing it all. And yes, there's some truth to it. Actually, even in their report, they indicate some of that. But I think here's what's interesting on this is that shift is starting to change. Now, I'm not saying it's already changed. It's already completely shifted. But if you look on the far right, what is that, the right side of this, there was a dip. ChatGPT was released at the end of 2022. There was a little bit of kind of like increased, inflow. It kind of like dipped when it first came out because everybody's like, oh, we're not going to need it. And then it went up and down. It's been kind of all over the place. And then it starts to kind of move up. So if you look at the red chart on the top there, you can see that after ChatGPT released it, it kind of destabilized a bit, then took a really heavy dip, which I think that's what a lot of people are feeling. If you're early career or entry-level talent, you felt that heat. You felt that push through 2023, 2024, and through 2025. But we're starting to see now, and I talked about this last week, that I think more and more people are starting to wake up to and realize is that AI is not delivering on the promises for these seasoned experts. This idea that, we can just get rid of entry-level talent. And they're going, uh-oh. And now they're also realizing AI can't do the work of the seasoned folks as well as everybody thought. There's a lot of intellectual property capital that's in people's heads, contextual understanding that's there that people don't have. And so now they're realizing, they're going to leave. We don't have that information. We also don't have people available to take on their roles. And so it's a slow turn, but we're actually starting to see companies wake up to the fact that, okay, maybe we shouldn't have gotten rid of all of those roles. Maybe we need to be a little more conscious of our seasoned, experienced talent. And maybe we need to unfreeze the pipeline of people who are looking for jobs. And that also, just to be clear, I think that's also one of the reasons we're feeling this in ways that aren't necessarily visualized on the chart. Because we might go, well, why is unemployment not being moved quite like we thought when it feels like it? And some of it is, well, people who are out of jobs didn't necessarily, like if you're new early career talent, you might have just never found one. So, it throws off some of the numbers. And so I understand when I get the feedback that it's like, well, it feels a lot heavier than it is. And it is bad right now. There's no denying the fact that the market is not great. if you're looking for a job. There are lots of companies making reckless, in my opinion, foolish decisions on how they're thinking about talent and what they're doing with it. And it's messing with things big time. So don't interpret my pushback on the Anthropic report that none of this is true. No, it is. It's just you need to be really careful with how you interpret reports like these. And then also keep in mind that Anthropic, their reputation's a little bit questionable. So, you say you're out there to ensure humans have a role in the market, but then also you're caught making all these claims that AI is going to get rid of all jobs, and you're the one making the tool and trying to raise money for things. So just, you got to take all these things in context. Now, those are just some of the biggest insights that I want to kind of clarify on so you understand. You can go check out the report yourself. It's on Anthropic's website. It's only 17 pages, so not a big, long report that you have to go through. But as always, we get to the end of this and people kind of go, okay, great. So what? So now what? What do I do with this? Helpful now when I see those charts show up on social media, when somebody makes a claim, did you see this? Did you know this? This just came out of this report. You can push back and say, well, it's not quite what you think. But then it comes back to, well, we got to do more than talk. So what can we do? I think the first thing that I would recommend to everyone right now, and this is, if you didn't listen to last week's podcast or the week before, I can't remember which one, but I was talking about some of the demographics. Oh, it was this week. We gotta unfreeze the entry level early career roles like fast. There were many companies, many organizations put an all-out hiring freeze and just eliminated roles that were considered entry-level early career. And it was all based on the assumption that AI would be able to handle all this administrivia and all this stuff. And that's, again, on this chart, why there's such a significant dip when you look after ChatGPT's release date in especially the top quartile roles, where, hey, we think AI can do this. It has high exposure. We don't need people here. And so there was a massive dip. That is still largely in place, even though it's starting to tick up. I would say if you are a leader, you need to be working actively to unfreeze that. Because going back to my point from last week, AI is not going to fill the gap, and we've got a looming labor crisis on our hands as seasoned people are planning and are actively leaving the workforce. You need people there who can actually fill these roles. And if you don't start, because you can't just train and upskill your junior early career, entry-level talent tomorrow. And so if you wait, you're going to have a massive leadership gap. There's going to be this big gap from the time all these people leave, and then you go, oh no, we got to backfill this. And then you're going to have to source for them. You're going to have to find them. You're going to have to recruit them. You're going to have to bring them in, and you're not going to have anybody there to actually develop and grow them. And that's going to be a massive problem for any business leader. So here's a micro action. All right. I tried this week to actually break down the actions. Yes, in general, like focus on unfreezing your entry-level early career talent and moving that pipeline along. But if somebody said, oh, right, Christopher, but where do I start? I think one thing every leader can do today is go look for in your organization just one level that you froze or put on hold because you didn't think you'd need it, or you thought AI would be able to cover the gaps. Hey, just use AI to cover the gaps. Go talk to the hiring manager and ask them if AI does do all the administrivia. Let's say in theory, which it can't. We've seen from the spider chart, AI is not covering all the gaps, and it's not just because it can't. It's sometimes just we're unable to for restrictions. But ask that hiring manager, what would that person do if we could get AI to do all that? Because there is this perception, if we can just get AI to do all the tasks, then we don't need the person. And unfortunately, that just doesn't hold up. And you need to be talking to your leaders that are over these roles saying, hey, we got to think about how we're building the future of this, because AI will start to fill out that spider chart. And even in that, you're still going to need these people to be able to do things, but you need to start thinking about what would they be doing if they weren't doing some of this administrivia that an entry level or early career person might do. So now's the time to do it. Bring it up in a meeting. Find that one role, go to that manager and say, hey, let's talk about this. I know we put this on hold for whatever reasons. Let's talk about if we were to bring them in alongside AI, what would we have them doing so that you can start to proactively plan? The second one is re-engineering the exposed roles right now. I think this is a really, really, really important piece to think about, because going back to the combination of the spider chart combined with the gray tsunami that's coming, there are a lot of these highly exposed roles. Now, again, not that they would be unnecessary, but what exposed means is AI can do a lot of the rote, routine, administrative work within those roles, which means you actually need to re-engineer them. You need to actually redesign the roles alongside AI. And now is the time to do it, assuming you unfreeze some of those previous early career roles, because now you have these new folks that are coming in that have a different perspective, new capabilities, a different level of energy, and you can pair them alongside your more seasoned veterans who can say, all right, let's think about what this job looks like alongside AI and actually re-engineering it. Because the last thing you need is just to hand things over from these seasoned roles recklessly to AI, not really knowing, is it doing a good job with it? Is it not? All these other things. You actually need to redesign these roles, which means you actually need both parties there. You need the experts who know how to do it before they leave, alongside the folks who are going to be taking on the roles so they can be thinking and pushing about, well, what if we had AI doing it this way? What if we worked around it this? And so something you can actually do this week to prepare for that, because you don't want to be caught by the gray tsunami alongside a frozen talent pool, alongside a frozen hiring pipeline. That is a dangerous, dangerous combination to have those two things mix. And so in your next team meeting, now is a good time to start getting your seasoned experts, your senior folks, to start sharing consistently, where does AI get things wrong? Have a discussion at your next team meeting with your most seasoned folks. Ask them. We know everybody's using AI. They're using it to help them with things. But I actually want to know, where is it getting it wrong? Where, when you go to use it, do you go, it gives me this, but it's not what I would actually have it do? Because those are the things that you need to be focusing on translating to your early career folks as you're starting to re-engineer and redesign the roles. You need to be saying, hey, where do our most seasoned experts go? AI is really good at taking this off my plate. It's really great at this. It gets it mostly right. I really don't have a whole lot that I have to do with it. You want to preserve the things that they go, but you do not want to trust AI on this because it gets it wrong every single time, or the amount of work I have to put into with AI to get it to even be remotely close, it's not even worth the time. You need to be flagging those things so that you understand the difference of where AI exposure truly is, not based on an Anthropic spider chart. You want it based on what your people, your seasoned, most senior professionals, your high performers are telling you. This is where the human in the loop actually makes a difference. You need that data for your organization, and you're only going to get it if you ask. And that is absolutely something you can do at a team meeting and facilitate discussion around it. Make sure you make it clear the goal of this is not to figure out how to automate your jobs. The goal of this is for us to start working together to say, hey, you're not going to be here forever. We need to start thinking about who's filling your shoes. We want to re-engineer this with people and AI in mind to the very best of our ability to create a better future for everyone. And then you can start listening and hearing, what is it that AI does? What does it do well? What does it not do well? Which takes me to my third and final action that really, really drove me nuts about this chart in particular, is just, we continue to have such gaps in our understanding of AI can do it versus AI can do it well. We have to stop measuring observable as successfully automated. Just because AI can do something and give the appearance of completing something, you ask it for something, it spits something out on the other side that looks good enough. That is extremely dangerous. And we right now have countless people making sweeping organizational decisions based on complete vanity metrics like adoption, like output, like, I mean, just pure activity reports. More stuff is happening. More tickets were closed in customer service. Therefore, AI is effective. Was it? Is it really? Those are questions you need to be asking. Okay, we implemented an AI agents into our customer service to help deal with tier 1 customer service issues. It's closing 10 times more tickets. Okay, you might see that as success. Have you actually looked under the hood and said, all right, it's closing 10 times more tickets, but is it closing them? Are the people it's closing them for satisfied with what they got? Did it actually solve their problem? Oh, well, we don't know because it's doing it so fast. We don't have time to go back and look at. That's a problem. And this is happening literally everywhere. That's just one example that I see all the time where people are assuming because more is happening, it must be good. And it is going to take us out. And I continue to get pulled into things where people have made these assumptions or they think something's going great. I talked about one on a social media post last week where I got brought in to do an assessment, an evaluation of how effective an AI initiative went. And they were thinking this went great. We have had great success with this AI initiative. And within a very short period of time, we were able to deconstruct this thing and realize it was actually in the red big time on a very steep downward trend were they to continue. And it's all because unintended consequences and activity does not translate to effectiveness. And so if you don't start asking those things, so what can you do? Like what action can you take? Well, identify, go look, figure out what reports you're looking at right now. Figure out which reports, if you have them, are being affected by AI. Like I said, if you have AI customer service agents, what reports are you looking at to assess, is it working? Is it as good as we think? And ask your teams, hey, what do these metrics actually tell us? And how do we know that it's effective versus we're just seeing more of it? How do we know that these things actually matter to the business? I have spent my career in different fields and industries where people are looking at numbers and assuming because it's data, we're data driven. Well, if the data you're driven by is useless, you're not running efficiently, you're not running effectively. And we don't think about those things. And so it's really important to think about, well, what data are we looking at? Is it the right data? And how do we know? And then layer on there, okay, and if this is being affected by AI, we might be seeing spikes in things, but are we sure that what it's affecting is actually improving, not just happening more frequently? And that's something you can do right now because you all have these reports. You're all looking at them today. Ask these questions. Do this investigation now, because the last thing you need to do is have a catastrophic fallout as the result of an AI implementation. And then you go back and go, wow, we could have seen this coming a mile away had we just taken a look, had we spent a little time analyzing this. So there you go. That's the breakdown of the Anthropic report and 3 things I think you all can do. So please, we need to stop operating out of panic mode related to job elimination. Yes, AI is affecting things. Yes, the market is rough right now. I'm not denying those realities. But now is actually the time to lean in and focus on re-engineering these exposed roles that we have right now, fixing the broken talent pipelines, because AI is not going to just take them over. You're still going to need these folks. So as you're re-engineer with the people who are going to be taking that on, and then start demanding and looking for metrics that measure quality, not just volume and speed. If we can get some progress on those 3 areas, we can really start to turn the ship and move things in a better direction. And let me just say this. If you take these 3 actions back to your team, if you go back and you start looking into this and you realize you are flying completely blind or you need some help with it, this is exactly the kind of work I do and try and work with leaders to help fix these problems. So if you go back and you try and action some of these things and you go, woof, this is a little bit out of my league, don't be embarrassed. The last thing you can do is just go, I'm just going to muscle it down and try and do it and hope for the best. Reach out, we'll set up some time, and we'll get you set up with a roadmap that'll take you to a better, you and your teams, to a better place. With that, I'm Christopher Lind, and this has been Future Focused. We will see you on the other side.